All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for Mastering Your Marketing Potential. And yes, we'll have just a little bit of Jedi going on in today. So today, for those of you who don't know, I'm Amanda Sutt. I'm the creative director and CEO at Rock, Paper, Scissors. And we are creative problem solvers who partner with leaders struggling to prioritize their branding, marketing, and websites to build better marketing habits and structure. And this could look like us coming in as your CMO to support you through a retainer or supporting you with a project. So just giving you a little overview of where we come. This is over 30 years of been doing this. And today I have Valerie Kinney joining me as one of our senior content managers, marketers. Oh my gosh.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're glad you're here.
All right. Just want to let you all know that today is an interactive presentation. I even have two QR codes because we have two downloads for you. The first one is a worksheet. If you want to download that, you can follow along. We're not just going to sit and lecture you. We're going to give you some resources to help you master your marketing potential. But a worksheet wasn't enough. You also needed a spreadsheet. So the planner is another format for some additional resources. It's just a better way to be able to build on some of those materials. So that is all in there for you. So I'll leave this up for another second while I talk about some other things if you want to download it. And Valerie has put the PDF in the chat link, so you have it there as well. And we'll have these links throughout as well. So please use the Zoom chat. So if you have questions or things pop up, let us know. And we definitely have time for a Q&A at the end. So with that, let's get started. All right, so we're thinking about this. We're going to talk a little bit about Alan Dibb, and he is an amazing marketing thought leader and the author of the one-page marketing plan. And I think he sums this up really well. Marketing is the strategy used for getting to your ideal target market to know you, like you, and trust you enough to be a customer. And I think that's a really important part of like, what are we doing with the marketing? And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. So yes, there's a blank screen here because I want to walk you through and start with a definition of what marketing is for us. Blank page. I want us to be all on the same page with this and talk through so that before we get into the nitty gritty of this, we're starting at the same spot. So what is marketing? And first, let's break this down. Let's pretend we have a circus. And if you have the circus, if you're going to hang up posters around town to let people know, that's advertising. If you take one of your elephants and you put a banner over it promoting that the circus is coming to town, that's promotion. You got to walk them through the town too. If that elephant goes a little rogue and goes through the mayor's garden, you got some publicity going on. If people start to post about it, we got some PR going on. And then when they come and they buy tickets, that's sales. And marketing is if you had planned all of that to work together. So marketing is that big, broad umbrella that holds all these other pieces in it. And this is why we pull in our lovely Jedi into this, because it truly is a mastering process. There's a lot of finesse that goes into this. And also, it's not copy paste for everybody going from one to the next. Not all businesses are going to have the exact same definition and plan that's going to work for them. So that's what we want to focus on today, is understanding the elements so that you can then build a plan that works for you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
And when we think about all this, we want you to be lazy marketers. You heard us correctly. We want you to be lazy. So how do you do that? Well, we like to start off with the 80-20 rule. It's one of our favorites. And if you've ever heard of this, you know where it's going. 20% of the work generates 80% of the results. But Alan Dibb kind of takes this a step further by saying the marketing plan ends up being 20% of the business planning process that generates 80% of the results. So that being said, let's work smarter and not harder.
Absolutely. And starting with talking about a plan, you wouldn't build a house without a plan, because then you're going to end up with windows and doors and weird spots and maybe things don't line up. So why would you not start your marketing without a plan as well? Because you want to make sure that things line up, that things work together, that the whole piece is a cohesive product. So here's our little house that we're going to work on today. And we're going to focus on 3 elements. First is target audiences. Who are we trying to reach? Then we're going to talk about the message. What do we need to tell them? And then finally, the channels. How is that message going to those audiences? Because I am sure all of you get so many sales pitches and ideas about all these different channels that are out there. And you could go out of business marketing on all these channels and not producing results. So part of this is selecting what is the critical pieces, and going back to what Valerie said, how do you be lazy? How do you do the least amount of effort? What are those 20% that generate the most results for you?
And we are going to start this process with talking about target audiences. And so we love this quote right here because, yes, making stuff, doing great work that is a service to other people, that's awesome. But making connections is even better because those connections are what brings your audience in. And with most businesses and organizations, you're probably going to have multiple audiences you need to reach. So we want to talk about breaking those down into different segments. So if you joined us a little late, there is a worksheet to download. The link is in the chat. And this section is on the worksheet. So this is kind of our intro to the worksheet. We've got 3 audience segments here that we like to break things down into. So the first is the primary audience. This is going to be your bread and butter, your current customers who are most likely going to invest in your product or services over and over again. This could include prospects too that you've been nurturing for a while that are pretty close to converting. Then you've got your secondary audience. This includes potential customers, maybe your competitors' customers, and other individuals who may not make the purchasing decisions themselves, but often have influence in that process with the primary audience members. And then you're also going to have flanker audiences. These are typically the people who aren't ready to buy now, but they have contact with your brand. They're aware of it. They're aware of what you have to offer. And so you want to be mindful of them as well. So one of the examples we like to use with what a flanker audience is thinking about going to the theater. Most theater tickets are purchased by women, but they typically need to make sure their husband, their boyfriend, their partner, whomever is going to be willing to go. Those individuals are the ones that influence the buying decision. So they are the flanker audience there. And when we think about adding all this into audience profiles, we got to look at the types of information we need to collect on these people that you either already know or you're hoping to connect with, because that builds out in your mind. And we like to document this so that you have a reference point to go back to as you're planning campaigns and that sort of thing. So with your audience profiles, there's 2 kind of key pieces of information that we look at. Demographics. This is age, ethnicity, location, education, income, occupation, to name a few. And then you have psychographic factors as well. What kinds of activities do these people enjoy? What are their personal and cultural values, their attitudes, behaviors, interests, opinions, lifestyle, daily habits? And as you're thinking about all of these factors, you do also want to think about the pain points these people might be facing as it relates to what you have to offer, their mindset, and how they make purchasing decisions.
All right, so we have more worksheet pieces. And just a reminder, we are recording this and we will be sending you the recording. So if you want to go back through this in more detail and fill this stuff in, we highly recommend doing that. But this is a template for building out your audience profile. You'll notice it's 1 page because we could absolutely write a whole book on all of this and go into great detail. But after you write it, people aren't really going to look at it. So we recommend doing a 1-page version of your audience profile. And this, you might end up having multiples of these. So if you have 3 primary audience profiles, you're going to have 3 of those, and you might end up one with your secondary audience as well as your flanker audience. So you end up with a whole bunch of pages in here. And so this ends up being a great resource as you're onboarding new team members. If you're noticing you're having a disconnect with services that used to work, you have this to go, okay, who are they? What is this like? And so once again, what Valerie was talking about, we break it down into demographics at the top in the green section. And then below is the psychographics, the beliefs, lifestyle, and the marketing channels. We also put some content on the right column. We do recommend putting a picture in there. Like find a customer that you're dealing with that you're engaging with. That sounds a little bit better. To help you understand what that looks like. If we're going back to the theater goer, the primary audience might be like a female. We'd probably say middle-aged maybe in this case, and put a good picture of her up there. And then the flanker will have the doting husband on that. And that just also gives a visual representation of which profiles, because if you end up with a handful of these, it's going to help you select each one better. And then we also put a call out for pain points and concerns. And this is getting into what are some of the hesitations either to buy, or what are they going through psychologically in that purchasing process? Like, why do they want to engage? What's going on? Because we don't always see that in the demographics and psychographics, but it's that good reminder of what do we need to overcome when we're talking with this audience member. All right. As well as that, so demographics are relatively easy for us to start to fill in. You guys could do a survey out to your customers if you don't have that information. If you're trying to get a new segment, you could also reach out to some of these organizations. You can America Fact Finder, Urban Institute, US Census, public records from state, local, and county government, as well as libraries. You can find a lot of this data. You typically don't want to go much, like a census is every 10 years. So anything more than 10 years old is probably not going to be relevant, especially if you're in a hyper growing community. So just be aware of the time frame of it, but you should be able to collect a lot of that. And there's a lot of organizations that are set up to be able to collect that. And you just have to do a little bit of research, but just know that they're out there. You don't have to collect everything, especially if you're trying to get into a new segment. Market research is amazing, and it's usually a great investment, but you don't always have the funds, resources to do that. So this is a good way to be able to bypass it as well. All right. Demographics in some ways are easy. Psychographics is a little bit more challenging, especially if you're starting out and you don't know your audience as well, or if you have like a new team member who's heading up marketing or sales. You're going to want to work with them to figure this out, or give them access to audience members. But we have 7 questions here, and this is also on your worksheet, to help you work through and start to figure this out. So I'm going to go through these so take notes, thinking about, I do recommend as we're going through this, think about one of your audience members and your primary audience. And if you think about one person, it's a lot easier to kind of workshop this than a big broad group of it. And then you kind of do that for a couple different ones. But so I want you to take a second, picture an ideal audience customer for you. This is what I want you to think about. First is, what are your audience's concerns to your product or service? 2, what has happened in the past that led your audience member to this point of concern? 3, what about your product or service matters most to your audience members? 4, how does your product or service solve a need, pain, or make your audience feel good? 5, how does your product or service better the life of your audience member? 6, what goes through the mind of your audience member before they purchase your product or service? And finally, what is the final straw that makes the audience pull the trigger and move forward with your product or service over others? And so this is a great workshop. You should absolutely do this if you have a sales team. Like, you can do it by yourself. It really helps if you can collaborate with somebody. This is one of those that I recommend. Like, we do it with new clients. We're trying to understand what that is. I also recommend this. I was just saying, if you have a new team member coming on, it's a great way to really help make sure upfront. I'd put this in their onboarding of making sure that they understand who that is, and that you're always building your business products and services to support your end user. So just some great questions. And, you can have a very lengthy conversation, deep. You could spend a whole day talking about these, I'm sure. But just do a quick little workshop, because it really does help have those deeper conversations to put your customer at the forefront of what you're planning. All right, that's it for audiences. It's a good start. Now we're going to shift over into messaging. You know who you're talking to, but what do they want to hear, and what's going to help work through that process? I love this quote from Donald Miller: "The clearest communicator wins." And this is so critical, because some of the best brands are not the most successful brands. Some of the most successful brands do not have the best product. And I'm sure saying that there's something popping in your head. You're like, oh yeah, everybody knows this one, but man, there's such a better one out there. But the one that they know the best and is the most successful typically has the best, clearest message. So that's what I really like want you to focus on is how do you communicate better to get somebody to buy? All right, I'm going to start with a little story because what we want to talk about is, what does this look like? What does clear communication look like? So we're going to do a little history. We're going to start with the transformation of Apple computers. So I think a lot of you probably know who Steve Jobs is and this lovely brand that he built. But when he started this is 2 of the 8 pages of the original advertisements that they put in, I believe it was Time magazine. 8 pages. And you're looking at that, there's a lot of text on there. And it kind of looks like an instruction manual because it was. They put everything they could think about on those pages and they made it so technical. Now, to remind yourself like what it was back in the day, people weren't using technology then. There were very few people that had even touched a computer, let alone had personal home computers. So this would have looked like absolute Greek and would have been so overwhelming to them. So if you know your Steve Jobs history, you know he started it. And then at some point, he actually got fired from Apple. And when he was fired from Apple, he did some other things. He started and supported some other companies, one of which was this little animation studio called Pixar Animation. And this was before Toy Story came out. But through that process and he's one of the 3 co-founders of the box office hit organization. And through that process, he learned a lot about storytelling. And in that process of learning about storytelling, applied it to what he was doing with Apple. So when he was at Pixar, he was not with Apple. And then they hired him back because they were really struggling. And when he came back, he brought his knowledge with him and he had some new ideas and new initiatives that he wanted to take. And he worked with a new agency and he went from 8 pages of technical jargon to 2 words with the new campaign. Think different. There isn't even a computer on that ad. The idea was to empower people to think about what can the computer enable you to do. And that's the transformation of why Apple is in so many people's hands every day with their iPhones or their computers, or AirPods or all the iPad, all the different devices. And it was being the clearest communicator. They went from not to think different. And as this process of Steve Jobs went through this, we like to use the hero's journey framework. And this is a great way to do it because it's so easy. In the instance of the Apple ads, that first ad was just talking about the computer and everything that it can do. But that doesn't help somebody envision what it's like to be using it. And so what we want to do with the hero's journey is you want to put your customer as the hero of the journey. We want to make them, in this case, we want to make them Luke Skywalker. Because for everybody who knows the Star Wars stories, Star Wars actually follows the hero's journey, where you meet a character who's in distress, who meets a guide, Yoda, who helps them along their quest. And that's the transformation. That's the story framework that we want to start talking about when we're thinking about how do you message your customer. And I'm going to let Valerie, the one who actually writes all these stories, get into more detail on it.
All right. So what you see right here in front of you, this is our little map of the hero's journey. And when it comes to your products and services, like Amanda was saying, it's so important to remember you are not the hero. Your organization is not the hero. It is your customer, aka your character. And this is the journey that you as the guide should be taking them on. So like Star Wars, Harry Potter is another great example of a story, movies, and books that use this, and there are countless others. I'm sure you guys are probably starting to recognize that in your mind of some of your favorite movies. So we have our character, they have a problem, This problem could be an external problem. It could be an internal problem. It could be a philosophical problem, or it could be a problem that mixes all of those together. And it could be multiple problems. So then they meet a guide, that's you, who understands this fear that they have, this situation that they're going through. You give them a plan. That plan calls them to action. And then that either results in joy or success if they follow your plan, buy your product, invest in your services, or the despair and failure of not going with the plan. Now, why do you want to include both? That's where it starts building a good story. You need to help people imagine what's at stake and what the consequences are for both if they go with the plan or if they don't, because that helps keep them engaged and helping them take those steps, sometimes little baby steps, towards making that decision to invest in what you have to offer. And so when you think about the story you want to tell, we always like to start with the end results in mind. What is it that goal with this story? What are you selling? What are you going to make money at? What is it you want your audience to walk away knowing, and that action that you want to guide them toward? So in order to achieve those results, like we said earlier, you got to know your audience. Why do they care about this? Why do they want to buy it? How is it going to make their life better? And all those different things we talked about with the demographic, more so with the psychographic information. Where do they spend their time? How do they receive information? Because that's going to help you determine the best places to get that story out into the world. Then you build that system to get your message out there in front of them. For some people, this might be as simple as an automated email drip campaign where you send several emails out over the course of a specific period of time that might be educational, guiding them to that investment if they're not quite ready when they first talk to you. For other people, it might be a mix of different marketing channels and mediums. So it could be video content, social media, blog posts, emails. There's lots of different ways this can go, and it just kind of depends on knowing your audience and how do they receive information, and also that story you need to tell and how is that going to be best received. And so then we always like to tell people, don't assume your first draft is perfect. Newsflash, it never is. You always want to have people review it and give you feedback and edit, and then pilot. Give yourself a short period of time to just test things out a little bit, and then go back and revise and get that actual official launch out there. And even then, you still want to plan a time to check in, see if you're making progress towards your goals, and adjust your message and your strategy if you realize something is not working. So we want to look at a little bit of a real life example with how we've done this. We wanted to sell messaging workshops. And so the thought behind this is, well, why are our clients going to care about this? The answer is they sometimes struggle with messaging. Not everybody is a words person like me. So how do we help those people that may be messaging, figuring out, okay, I know what the story is, but how do I tell it in a way that people are going to understand and respond to it? We like to help them do that. So part of this was we want to sell more content retainers so we can help our clients grow their businesses and be an active part of that. And we also want to support our clients through that messaging and marketing mix. And in order to get them started, we've got to work with them on figuring out what is their story. So we've done quite a few messaging workshops since we started offering this, and the clients who have gone through that process, they have more clarity around the story that they want or need to tell about their products and services. And they have that clear message that will resonate with their audiences, and they're able to start figuring out, we'll talk about this in just a second, how they can keep reusing that message over and over again. So if you need help with your messaging, we do have a workshop for that. We can help you cut through the clutter and develop that message that is clear and is going to connect with your audience and help further your mission. So I alluded to this a second ago. We told you at the beginning, we want you to be lazy marketers. Here's a great way to do that. When you have your story in place, recycle that content. So for example, let's say you worked on a longer form piece of content. This could be your website homepage. It could be an interior page about a specific product or service, or it could even be a blog post. You've got the big piece. Now start figuring out how can you break this up into smaller chunks that you can distribute out on social media, in an email marketing campaign, or your newsletter, or even short little videos, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. Those are great places to start sending out that bite-sized chunks of content that is a little bit easier for people to digest. So maybe those audience members who aren't quite ready to make a decision yet, this is just giving them a little bit more information, and a little bit more information. You're nurturing them by recycling your content.
All right. So hopefully you have a better sense of one, why your message is so important, what you need to do to simplify it, and then just how to get the most out of it. This is going back to what Valerie started with. We want you to be lazy. So if you take nothing away from this, we want you to be lazy marketers, and all of this is to help support that as we're going through this. So I'm going to pivot us over to marketing channels. So we define marketing channels as all the different ways that you can connect with your audience members. So this is by no means a comprehensive list, but it's a good place to get you started. And this is also in your worksheet. And it's a good place to, as I said, this is a great way to collaborate, but also just to do a little inventory of what are you doing? Like what are you doing that's word of mouth? What is social media? Do you have PR? Do you have events? Print advertising, direct response advertising, digital advertising. And I want to start with no company, well, maybe some big ones, but most companies should not be doing all of these. You've got to figure out what the right mix is. And so often what we discover when we start to work with clients and doing marketing audits and working with them is they are doing so many things that they don't even realize how many different things they're doing. And we go back to that 80-20 rule. 20% of your channels more than likely are doing 80% of the work. So let's get rid of that other 80% that's not doing the work, do the inventory. And it just starting with a list. Let's look at it. Let's see what's working, what's not working. So you have this list. And then I gave you a little prioritization of these. And what I recommend doing is listing out your current ones. And then I also gave you a list to be able to put new ones that you might want to do because your audience changes, the world changes. What worked pre-pandemic is not necessarily working post-pandemic. So taking that time, and it is really important to stop doing things sometimes. If it's not working and the excuse of, well, that's the way we've always done it, is one of my least favorite things to hear anybody ever say, because I don't want to know what you used to do. I want to know what's driving results, because it is really easy in the marketing world to feel like something's important or to feel like you've got to keep up with the Joneses. But if it's not driving results, if it's not helping your business grow, if it's not building better connections, if it's not helping your team better understand your audience and innovate for you, then stop. Just stop doing it. Like, you've got other things you need to do or new channels that you want to try. So list them out, prioritize them, look at it. And that's a great place to start seeing, okay, what are we doing? Are we spinning our wheels? Are we wasting time on stuff that isn't generating the results we want? So a little bit of an inventory. Then I don't want you to just take an inventory. Because not everything has the same weight and not everything's going to have the same results. So what I have up here is the audience funnel. And this is the process that we all go through every time we make a purchase. And you're like, oh my God, that's a lot. It is a lot. And we talk a lot about you hear that like you need to see something 7 times before you notice it from a marketing quantity standpoint. And this is part of it, because you go through this if you're going to buy a house. You go through this if you're going to go get your hair cut. You go through this if a new piece of tech comes out and you're like, whoa, what is that? Am I skeptical of it? Am I excited about it? So this is what it is. There's different variations of it. I like this one. It breaks it down into 4 simple categories. Our first one is awareness, is I might need something. And most of the time, this is what problem are we solving? And people might not know exactly what that problem is. And it might not even be something like a new product out on the market. If you've never experienced something before, don't even know it's available. Let's go back to Apple computers. When they first came out as personal computers, in the 70s, people weren't thinking, I need a home computer. But as that started to shift and understand why it was, it takes time. So it takes time. But awareness is that first thing. Ooh, I might need something. Then we go into interest of like, oh, that personal computer is a real thing. You know what? I need some more information. Is this going to be applicable to me? And that's when we hit that interest level. And from there, then we go into decision. If you decide, yep, I really want to get one. I think that's really going to make a huge difference for me. Then you're going to start to compare. Do I want We're going super retro today. Do I want an Apple? Do I want an IBM? Do I want a Dell? Going through all those, how much do I need to reinforce my desk to, support those heavy monitors, all those things. But you're going back and forth and you're making decisions about it. And then you go into the action of purchasing. So we go through this every time that we're doing this. And in today's world, awareness, interest, and decision are all in marketing, and sales is the last step. Back when we're using my retro computer example, this was flipped. Awareness used to be the only piece of marketing. Interest, decision, and action were all handled through human communications. So in the last 20 years, we have totally flipped the priority of how much is marketing versus how much is sales because of the digital world and the scalability that we have. So all that is to say, we want to start thinking about your different marketing channels and what is their job. So when we talk about awareness, most people, if they just found out about a new product, are not going to go buy it. So any of our awareness marketing is not going to have a super high conversion rate. Awareness marketing can include things like billboards. This could be print advertising where we're just trying to TV advertising, just trying to get our name out there so people know what it is. So we're going to have a much smaller ROI on that. And that's really important to know when you're inventorying your marketing channels and you see that your awareness doesn't have the same ROI as some of your decision and action tactics, doesn't mean you should get rid of it. Because if you're not filling the top of that funnel and getting people to be aware of it, you're not going to have anybody at the bottom of the funnel at the end. So we go through that. And we talked about awareness, billboards, TV, advertising, big pieces like that. Interest, I need more information. That can be things like blog articles. That could be informational pieces. That could be press releases, but it's a little bit deeper of education and more information. Let's go back to Apple's advertisement. The Think Different is a great example of an awareness piece of advertising. Their first piece is more of an interest and decision. Back then, you wouldn't have put it on, they didn't necessarily have the website the way that we do it. That information now needs to be when you're going through this process, at some point you are going to need more detailed stuff. But we don't want to hit people up front with all that because we're going to overwhelm them and they're just going to walk away. But as they work through interest and decision, that's when they're going to need more detailed stuff. So interest is also going to have stuff like your website. And then we go down into decision. This is comparing you to competitors. So this is things where Google Business Profile is really important, having reviews, social media. And when we talk about all these, people are looking for social proof. Like if you go to Amazon to buy something and the same product is listed by 5 different vendors or similar products, you're going to start to see which one is the most, 5-star reviews. Who already says that this works? So that's a really important part of that decision-making process. And then action. Is it easy for people to buy? Can they come to your website and purchase? Is it easy for them to make an appointment? Do you have some upsells on an e-commerce site that once they make that transaction, will they in the next 10 minutes buy something for 20% off? That kind of a thing. So that's what you want to be thinking about. And you want to start to map your channels to this process. And as we're doing this, I really take a pause. This is one of my favorite quotes. This is what we live and die by here at Rock, Paper, Scissors is people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people won't forget the way you made them feel. And I throw this in here because I think it's really important as you're thinking about this funnel and this buying experience of what is it like for your audience through that process. And I will remind you, when you are working for a company or selling something, you are no longer your audience. You now know too much information. And this is why when Valerie talked about getting feedback is so important, talking to your audience and understanding what is it like to experience your brand for the first time. And making sure as you're thinking about this funnel, because in your worksheet, you do have one that you can fill in, how do you want somebody to feel in that awareness phase, in that interest phase, in that decision phase, and in that action phase? All right. So a couple things to think about as you're filling this in is how probable does it seem that this channel could work? So when you're looking at your current marketing channels and at your new ones, that's a really important thing to be considering. Just because the Joneses are using it doesn't mean that it's even working for them. They could be doing it because somebody else is doing it. But thinking about how probable is it? Also want you to then also think about what will that cost to acquire a customer in this channel. You know, we work with some PI groups, and they're trying to get people with personal injury. What I mean by PI, personal injury advertisements, pay-per-clicks are super expensive because it is very competitive. And you have to decide if you're trying to break into that industry, is it worth it? Are you going to be able to make the money back on that? There are some channels that just don't work. Like we work with a lot of hair salons, and in most areas, pay-per-click is very reasonable. But for some reason, New Jersey is ridiculously expensive, and you're not going to, it costs more to get a lead than a year's worth of haircuts. So we have to be wise about that. How do we change keywords? What do we work with that? And making sure that's going to be worth the investment. If it's not, we go look for other ways. Community building, word of mouth campaigns. There's a lot of different things that we can look at when we look at that. I want you to also think about how many customers can you expect to acquire through this channel? And then also, what is the time frame needed to run tests within that channel and make sure it's working? So just some things to think about. All right. That was a lot. That's your house. Talked about your target audience, what your message, and what your marketing channels are. And having that foundation in place then leads to a marketing plan. How do you take all that and turn it into actionable pieces?
First step is to start thinking about goals. And we love this quote, a goal should scare you a little and excite you a lot. So obviously you guys have heard a lot this morning. You're probably got a lot of ideas rolling around in your head at this point. And we want to sit with that feeling of overwhelm for a second, because it comes when there are so many things out there to do, but there's no clear priority of what to do next. So that's why setting goals is so critical to the process of your marketing plan. And so when we think about goals, we like to think smarter. That smarter, not harder threads coming back into this presentation. You have probably heard of SMART goals before, but we like how Michael Hyatt takes a step further with smarter goals and how these can improve your chances of achieving your goals. With smarter goals, you want to cross-check the goals that you're setting against this acronym. They should be specific enough to direct your energies, measurable so you can keep track of your progress, actionable with a clear initiating verb that prompts specific activity, risky enough to leverage our natural tendency to rise to challenges, time keyed so you're prompted exactly when to act, exciting enough to inspire and harness the power of your intrinsic motivation, and relevant within the overall context of your life. We also want to set a few definitions up right here as we get deeper into this, define a few terms so that everybody's on the same page. Because we have had some people that have had a little bit of confusion about what are goals, what are objectives, that kind of thing over the years. So a goal, that's the result you want to achieve. The objective, that's how you're going to measure your progress that's needed to achieve the goals and whether you're on track. Strategies, that's the approach you take to achieve the goal. Tactics are the tools you're going to use to reach the goal. And then we always like to have a theme with a marketing plan. This makes it easy to remember. It's the thread that holds everything together and gives your team something to rally around as you're working your plan, getting everything out there into the world, checking back if there's new opportunities. Does this fall in line with our theme?
All right. So the question is, how do you even get to that point of filling in what your goals are and where do you work through this? And that last R in our smarter goals is relevant. And it's a tried and true SWOT analysis. There's so much value in it because it starts great, deeper conversations about what's going on. And what it does is it helps you ground yourself in what is realistic for our organization today. So when we host these workshops with clients, we like to break this, and it's not perfect, but it's a good way to kind of start thinking. But we like to start our brainstorming with strengths and weakness being internal. What is working really well and what is not working well internally? Then we talk about, we brainstorm, pull together all of those. We look at opportunities and threats. We always like to start this conversation as external. What are external opportunities and threats that we need to be aware of moving forward? And then typically what we want to do to meld this into something else is we're going to see that weakness list and we're going to start saying, all right, how are these weaknesses going to become opportunities for us moving forward? How do we take these weaknesses and even threats and turn them into opportunities and then strengths? And by really doing this and just looking at you and your organization, don't look at your competition, just look at the reality of it. This is where the best ideas come from. And so with that, we take those ideas and we start to turn them into goals and objectives. And when we talk about goals and objectives, I always recommend your marketing plan should be 12 months. If you're really new and you don't have enough information, 6 months is fine. And then you regroup another 6 months. And ideally you get to a point with 12. But when we're talking about your goals and objectives, this is where I want you to play pretend. And I want you to envision, where do you want to be in 12 months to feel like this year was successful? That's a really powerful mental exercise to really look at that. And that's where we start our goals and objectives piece. And typically we're looking for anywhere between 2 and 5 goals. We don't want to have too many because then we're not going to be able to move the needle on enough of these. And when we're looking at that, I typically, from a marketing standpoint, I like there to be 2 types of goals. I like you to have growth goals of how are we getting bigger and improving. And then we also have to infrastructure goals. And the reason is, as you keep growing, you're going to have new challenges and you're going to need more capacity in different ways. And if you don't pay attention to the infrastructure as you're growing, you are going to kind of collapse on yourself. So if every year when you're thinking about your marketing, you're thinking about both your growth and your infrastructure, you're never going to have that, oh gosh, we got to start all over again, or that didn't work, or we have so many upset customers. So that's just a nice little framework to go through for this. So the goal is what success looks like. Where do we want to be 12 months from now? Where do we want sales to be? Where do we want better communication pieces to be? Where do we want better engagement? What infrastructure pieces? And then for each one of those, we want to have objectives. Okay, what are the measurable things that help us know over the course of 12 months that we're making progress? I love using the example of hiking a mountain when we talk about this. Your goal is the top of the mountain. Your objective is, if we're doing a, you know, Appalachian trail hike, that's going to take us months. How do we know early on in that we're making our way across and we're going to we're going to get to Maine before it starts to snow? Those are important things. When you're hiking for months, you've got to know, I need to be to North Carolina in 3 weeks. I need to be to Virginia in 6 weeks, those kind of things. So you want to break down each one of those goals into smaller objectives to make sure that you're going to be able to make that goal, because 12 months is very fast, but it's also more complex. It's easy to have a goal that's by the end of the week, we want to have this, great. But when we have those longer goals, it's really important to take the time to have those milestones, because as human beings, we need to win. If we're not making progress, we're going to lose hope really fast. And you'll remember one of those other E's in the SMART goals was to be excited. We don't want to lose that momentum. All right. Valerie touched on this, the theme. Call this the red thread that ties everything together. You want to look for something as you look at all your goals and say, how do they work together? And the main reason to do this is for your own sanity, because I am sure all of you get a million questions asked of you every day and new ideas getting thrown at you. And by having something very simple, like our goal this year is, building connections. And if it doesn't have any, if that new idea isn't building connections, it is a thanks, but let's put it on the list for next year. Because if you keep adding ideas throughout the year, you're going to miss those goals to begin with. So that's something that you can memorize. It's usually like anywhere between 1 and 4 words, like super short. We usually even throw a graphic in there, just like you can see right now, the red thread, the red rope there, to remind you how simple a theme should be, that it should tie through everything else. Put a graphic in there. You can have it as a poster for the year. We make custom graphics for our team every year. Our theme this year is ship it. So we want to get things out. We want to see how quickly we can push things out. So those are things that you want to use your audience is never going to see this, but it's going to help you be have a more cohesive team and produce better results. All right, last piece of your resources, and this is the spreadsheet piece. So I want to tie all these things together that we've been talking about. You have your goals, you have your strategies, and your tactics. And when we're talking about this, we talked about the goal and we talked about your objective. Your strategy is your approach. How are you going to get there? And then those tactics, your tactics are typically going to be those marketing channels that we talked about 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. And what did those look like? Because so often when clients come to us, they come to us saying, hey, I think I should be advertising on this platform. And we go, why? And it's not to undermine them, it's to figure out why is that important and how is that supporting the goal that you want to grow? Is it just because you want to be on that platform, or is this something that you want to build upon? So by starting with that goal, then we're figuring out and making sure all of those tactics that you put in that funnel are in your marketing plan and you are supporting these pieces. So this is a pretty much a fill in the blank kind of a piece, but you're going to put in your action steps in your marketing channels. We recommend we put some best practices in here as well. We have who's responsible for it. It's really important to know who's in charge. Start and end date. Is this a whole year thing? Is this a Q1 project? Is it a Q2 project? What resources do you need? And what are your just deliverable metrics? So that just gives you a really tangible plan. And you'll notice right here up on the screen, this is not full detailed write-outs. There's a time and a place when you're doing specific creative kickoffs and needing to have a creative brief where you're talking about all the specifics of it. But your plan really helps if it is quick and easy to reference, because if it's super detailed, you won't go back and look at it. And we want to build something that you guys are regularly referencing going through this. So typically this sheet right here, you would end up with one of these for each one of your goals. So similar to what we talked about with audience profiles, you're going to have a couple pages, but that's it. Quick, easy to scan. It's always great to have those up on your wall as you achieve them. Give a big old cross through, show that you did it, you've achieved that. So just making it easy for you and your team to understand what you're focused on, not to get distracted by new shiny objects, and to make the progress that you have decided at the beginning of the year. All right. If you want more information, we are happy to highly recommend you scan this, join our mailing list. We are going to be rebooting our regular newsletter this coming year, churning out more resources like this on an ongoing basis to help you as a marketer know what you need to be doing. And then if you're on this list in the next 2 weeks, we kind of have a big announcement that's going to come through. So spread the word, because you might want to see what we've been up to and what's going to be rolling out for the second half of the year. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Valerie for questions.
All right. If you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We do have a few that were submitted in advance. And while you're doing that, just a couple of quick reminders for how to stay connected with us beyond today's presentation, because we definitely want to stay connected. So Amanda mentioned that newsletter sign up. You can follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn. If you're interested in that messaging workshop we talked about earlier, definitely let us know. And if you're not quite ready to tackle a marketing plan on your own, we also have an annual marketing plan workshop. So this is a workshop where we help you nail down those goals for the year, discuss how we can support you as your branding and marketing partner. What does that look like based on what you want to do and the plan that we recommend. So if you're interested in either of those, you can email info@123shoot, 123SHOOT.com, and we'll be able to share some more information with you. So first question, Amanda, do I really need a marketing plan if I'm a one-person operation or have a very small team?
Yes. The answer is always yes, because especially if you're a one-person team, because you're not going to be able to market that often. You're going to have to deliver your product. You're going to have to do fine. You're going to have to do, you're running a business. So that plan just helps you feel confident. And it gives you that place to go back to when things aren't working. Going, why isn't it working? What should I be adding to it? So you always need a plan.
Okay, next question. How often should I be checking in to make sure I'm making progress towards my goals?
I mean, At least monthly. Ideally, you should be doing some type of scorecard or KPIs every week just to make sure, but every business is going to be a little bit different. But the least frequent should be monthly, coming up with your plan and looking at it. I wouldn't look at it more than weekly. There's a totally different answer for sales. Salespeople are looking at numbers every day, but we're talking marketing. So, and especially if you're doing campaigns, you might have that frequency, but weekly, monthly. I do think it's also really valuable to have a quarterly, like how did we do? Because business fluctuates. You're gonna have some bad months and some great months. And you want to say, are we on track for the year? So having those quarterly check-ins before you do an end of year review is great.
And what tips do you have for people who create a marketing plan but have a hard time putting it into action?
Start small. And anytime we're doing anything is you want to build some confidence and some quick wins. Don't go complicated. If you're gonna take on some new things, figure out what's gonna be like the easiest one for you to achieve so you get traction. There's also some value and sometimes you're gonna start something and you just need to get the habit in place. And my greatest example of this is like having consistent content. So if you know that you need to be blogging every week and you know you need to be doing more social media content, first, you really just need to get that habit of, do I have space to write this content and get it out there? And so understanding that this is going to change over time, but start with building that habit. That's the easy part. Get the habit in place, and then you add things into it to make it as it gets more complicated. So how are my blogs doing? Are they getting optimized? How are the social posts that are driving that traffic? But you don't want to start with all of that at the beginning because you're just going to stop because it's too much. So with that, start easy, start small, and incrementally, if every time you do it, you add a little something else or do it a little bit better, that's the big part. You need to be confident to be lazy. That's the other piece.
I'll throw into with that. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon, especially when you're trying something new. So give yourself time to build up. Like Amanda said, then you can start adding new elements in, or, if it's just being more consistent on social media, I like to tell people, start with one post a week. One post a week should be doable. Once you get into that habit, can you add another post in and make it two, and then get up to whatever frequency works and is getting results and interaction. So that's my 2 cents on that. I think this is the final question we have here. When you are rolling out new products or services, do those become part of your annual marketing plan, or should you create a separate marketing plan for those specific items?
Ooh, that's a great question. All right. Typically you're going to have that be in your bigger plan, because this is what happens. And my team will attest to this all the time, of we get that, ooh, I can do this. My eyes are bigger than my stomach motion. And you have all these big product rollouts, and then you realize that you had all these other campaigns and marketing efforts that were running, behind the scenes, and it's too much. So it's important to have those factored into it, just so that you understand what do you have capacity for. When we talk about resources are dollars, of course, but it's also time, energy, capacity. And so by folding those into your marketing plan, you're giving everybody a better idea of all the things that are going on, because you might scale back some of those ongoing pieces in order to have a really big push for a big campaign or product rollout. So that's just goes into just also taking care of your team, also creating a reality for yourself that's achievable, not burning yourself out on something like this, because it's so easy for us to just be, oh, one more thing and one more thing in the marketing world. And so how do you put those boundaries on it? And part of it is understanding the full scope of what you're doing. So, great question.
All right, and with that, I think that's all of our questions. So before we close, we wanted to remind you that we did record today's presentation, like Amanda said earlier. We'll be emailing you a link to that recording in the coming days, probably sometime next week. So stay tuned for that, and feel free to share that if you feel like someone else may find it helpful. If there's members of your team that you want to start collaborating with, definitely send that out. And we'll make sure also that we include links to the worksheet as well as the spreadsheet in those emails, so that you guys have all the resources available. We appreciate you guys joining for us today. We hope you have a great rest of your day and your week, and we will talk again soon. Thanks, guys.